Welcome back to College Football Addiction. Drake C. Toll with us to talk a little bit about the portal, some major conferences, and maybe a little bit of competition in our video presented by BetUS. Drake, let's talk about it. The Big 12 and the SEC specifically. Everyone's crown jewel, right? The SEC that we like to brag on and talk about and everybody's favorite. Was the Big 12 more successful than the SEC in this portal window?
No doubt, TJ. Where the Big 12 is always going to win against the SEC is the Big 12 will get a lot of the better young players out of that conference. And from there, you can flip them into day one starters. Hey, you were a sophomore or didn't get your flowers in your 2 years in an SEC school, and you were promised playing time as a junior, but you don't really believe it. Where do you go? The Big 12. And SEC fans are like, oh, well, you're sloppy seconds. No. Legitimate good athletes are moving from the SEC and coming to the Big 12. And on the other hand, a great athlete out of Northern Illinois, like a Skylar Gill Howard who went to Texas Tech, who could look at the SEC, says, wait, I could walk into the Big 12 day one and immediately make an impact for a university. So I'm just going to do that. And so many of these athletes are kind of falling in the middle of the transfer portal because they don't feel as though they can make that big jump up. And again, at the same time, they feel as though, hey, I can make a little slight jump down into the Big 12 and immediately contribute wherever I go. Texas Tech had, by and large, the number one recruiting class of anyone out of the transfer portal this season. They're certainly not an SEC program. And one of the even better parts about where the Big 12 sits right now is what I call positive attrition. In the Big 12, you'll see schools like a Texas Tech, schools like a Kansas State and Iowa State. They don't lose a ton of pieces, BYU included, out of the transfer portal. Instead, they lose pieces that they didn't really need. You see them exit a school like BYU or Texas Tech, and they're not really well regarded or very highly regarded. And they're not even a net loss. They're kind of a gain once you lose those guys. They didn't contribute too well for you. They weren't going to contribute. They didn't pan out. You couldn't develop them. So instead of having them on your roster, why not take that second-year SEC guy from Auburn who still has a chip on his shoulder, who still has a lot to prove, and who can help even out college football? You think like, oh, well, is college football actually evening itself out? Vanderbilt beat Alabama. Northern Illinois beat Notre Dame this season, right? I can't even remember which school it was. That's how odd that it seemed that so many of these smaller teams were able to compete with a national championship contender, the team that got all the way to the last game and was within a score inside of 5 minutes to go. There are schools like Texas Tech, Colorado out of the Big 12 who dominated the transfer portal this year. And you're looking around the SEC going, yeah, you brought like 14 guys in and you have a pretty good transfer portal ranking, but also you lost 14 really good guys. So you're at just a net neutral at best, whereas a Texas Tech, we know they got better. A Colorado, we know that they got better. A Cincinnati, they got better, though marginally. A UCF, a Houston, a Kansas, a Utah. These teams, Baylor, Arizona, attacked 25 commits for Arizona out of the transfer portal. Baylor landing a former 5-star quarterback in Walker White. Oklahoma State, West Virginia. They lose the guys they need to lose. They gain new guys that they need to compete in the future of the Big 12. Whereas in the SEC, they lose the guys that could have been major contributors, and they gain guys who are major question marks. And if again, I'm on a rant. I'm on a rant, TJ. If you're an SEC fan who wants to say that you're the best conference in college football, two things cannot be true at the same time.
I will get right back to chatting with Drake, but first, I want to tell you about our friends over at BetUS. The Super Bowl coming up in a little over a week. If you're betting on that, if you're betting on college hoops, if you're betting on anything sports related, make sure you're doing it with our friends over at BetUS. Right now, you can use our code YouTube150 to get a 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit, 125% on your next two. All of that up to $2,000. We appreciate BetUS for their support this season and hope that you'll be betting with them.
We're the best conference in college football. We're head over heels better than everybody else. Lane Kiffin says it's different, but also, yeah, we could pull this transfer out of Western Kentucky, and he's going to be able to compete day one. Oh yeah, the best nose tackle in Tulsa. Yeah, we're going to pull him day one, and he's going to be able to compete. He's going to make our team a competitor. Wait a second. Thought you told me you were head over heels better than everybody else, but now a kid from Tulsa gets to compete for you? I don't think so. And again, that's why so many elite or very good transfer portal players are falling in the median right now. And where the median sits is the Big 12. And another really glaring example of this is quarterbacks, the depth of the quarterback play in the Big 12 this last year, from Avery Johnson to Rocco Beck to Shadur Sanders, who was in New York, could have been in New York as a Heisman Trophy contender. And you look at the SEC and you go, oh, shoot. Not only were the quarterbacks just kind of average this year, they're going to be even more average next year in that conference. A guy who was considered by so many preseason to be a Heisman contender in Carson Beck is going to the ACC. And Quinn Ewers got booed off the stage at Texas, and he was supposed to be the crown jewel of that conference. TJ, when we talk about winning the transfer portal, the Big 12 clears the SEC far and away.
Yeah, Texas Tech, I mean, you have to kind of start and end there. Texas Tech, what they've done in the portal, pulling so many guys that not just the SEC was like Florida State.
I'm sorry, TJ. Again, soapbox, man. I couldn't be more passionate about this. Texas Tech had such a good transfer portal class. Micah Hudson, their 5-star wide receiver, best player, transferred out and then was like, shoot, man, they're getting good again. And then transferring back in. Like, he's like, fine, I guess I'll get. Like, that's how good it is that a blue chip receiver who could have gone anywhere in the country wants to come back now because Texas Tech's so good.
You mentioned them. I mean, they're number one in On3's rankings. Not only are we talking about who won the portal, well, Texas Tech is up there. And I know LSU and Ole Miss, like Portal King University, they took about 1 billion guys. So on different sites, they're higher. But rating the actual quality of players, Texas Tech way up there. You mentioned Baylor, Kansas, Houston, all super high when you look at the quality of player that was brought in. And then you mentioned, I mean, Colorado even, right? Took less guys this cycle because they've built more of a foundation, but they have a defensive tackle that came from Alabama. They're not playing around with this. And so, yeah, I think, top to bottom, when you really look at what the Big 12 did, again, Texas Tech maybe being the standard for the sport this year, when you look at quality, it's pretty remarkable what the Big 12 has been able to accomplish. And it all kind of goes to what Brett Yormark pushes, right? Like the narrative that like, hey, open for business. We're ready to win now. We're ready to do things unexpected that maybe you thought the SEC, the Big 10 were going to do. It really just kind of falls in line with the whole Big 12 mantra, in my opinion.
So here's what's awesome about this. I think Baylor's a great example, and as a Baylor guy myself, I don't mind bringing it up. They lost guys in the transfer portal to Colorado State, Miami of Ohio. They lost guys at Jackson State, UTSA, Prairie View A&M, and Houston. Those aren't major universities. Like Baylor's losing talent, sure, but what we can prove is that they weren't good enough to play at a Baylor. So instead of having those guys on Baylor's roster, they go pick up recruits from Auburn, 2 guys from Oregon, from Texas A&M, from Louisville, from Alabama. That is how you know things are going really well for your university, is when, again, positive attrition. You probably aren't going to play here. Prairie View A&M's a better spot for you. Oh, but you kid out of Oregon who was a great recruit and just couldn't get on the field there, or there's an NIL deal. This is what happens so often, TJ. Oh my gosh, it's a soapbox. I've talked to offensive coordinators in college football who are handcuffed by their head coach. The reason they're handcuffed is because the team's top donor says, I want to unload the Loomis truck for that wide receiver. And then that wide receiver doesn't pan out, isn't very good. The offensive coordinator goes to the head coach and says, hey, we should be playing somebody else over this kid. He can't deliver. He's not making his money. The guy's like, well, we're giving him 1.2 in NIL, and it's our biggest donor, and that's the kid, that's his horse who he picked. We're kind of stuck here. I've heard these real-life stories from college football coaches. That's not happening a lot. That's not happening a lot in the Big 12. It's happening in Oregon, and if I'm a kid in Oregon and I got to sit behind the $1.2 million guy who's not producing, and the reason I got to sit there is because of NIL, I'm gone. Deuces. I'm still really good at football, but I'm going to go play in the Big 12.
We thought that the portal and NIL would make the rich get richer. And in some ways it certainly has, right? Like we're not going to pretend that it hasn't, but in other ways, and certainly the way that you're describing, the way that we talked about, it has evened out college football. And there's absolutely no doubt about it. You mentioned Vandy, you mentioned Northern Illinois. There are definite cases. I mean, shoot, look at Arizona State, right? Like there are definite cases of the Big 12, the ACC, these conferences that we kind of look at as lower or under. There's a definite case for college football being evened out thanks to the portal, thanks to NIL. Maybe not in the way that we think about it, right? The resources, Ohio State's always going to have more to spend. But in the situation you mentioned with maybe a guy that's backing up a big wide receiver in Oregon or wherever, it has certainly evened things out. Drake, where can people follow you? Where can they find more of your work, bud?
Well, TJ, I'll end it here. Cam Scadaboo, great example of that. Scadaboo could have gone to the SEC, sat on the pine for 2 years, and then been a great breakout player in year 5, or go to Arizona State, build a career, lead his team to the college football playoff instead of playing at Mississippi State, going 3-9 and rushing for 2,000 yards that are meaningless. At LO Big 12 or at Drake C. Toll on Twitter and wherever you find your podcast with Locked On Big 12.
Appreciate you, man. Appreciate BetUS for all their support. We will talk to you soon.
Let's do it.